Chapter 1. "Please, no!" Robbie Angusstam screamed as his father's heavy strap came whistling down on his bare back. He tried to yank his hands free, but his brother Boyden held him tightly against the dining room table. "Sulis, curse it! Why do I have to be such a worthless weakling?" He promised himself he wouldn't scream again, but he screamed just as loudly the next time the strap hit. "Sleeping by the river in the middle of the goddess-cursed afternoon. How many times must I beat you before you learn responsibility, boy?" His father brought the strap down even harder. "I didn't mean to." But Robbie's explanation turned into screams of pain as the strap landed again and again. Robbie let out a humiliating whimper. When his father finally stepped away and Boyden let go of his wrist, Robbie clutched a chair for support and struggled to hold back his tears. "By the goddess, don't let them see me cry." His father towered over him, red-faced and scowling. "Learned your lesson, boy?" "Yes, sir," Robbie said, ashamed of how pathetic he sounded. "I'm not going to have to send your brother looking for you again, am I, boy?" Angus Camliston loomed over Robbie, making him feel even shorter than he was. "No, sir." "All right, then. Stop lazing around like a fool and get your chores done." Angus hung the strap on its peg by the door. "If you finish before dinner's over, I may consider letting you join us." Like that will ever happen. Robbie clutched at his empty stomach, knowing he'd get nothing to eat before breakfast. He pulled his shirt carefully over the welts on his back and stumbled towards the back door. As he passed through the kitchen, one of the servants quickly drew the star of Sulis in the air to ward off his evil. He hated it when people did that, but how could he blame them? He caught his reflection in the shiny pots that hung from the kitchen wall. Dark black hair, the color of night and demons. Green eyes, unlike those of the children of the goddess. Skin darker than natural. He was also so short, his brother called him a worm. Robbie stepped outside and drew 2 large buckets of water from the well. He staggered towards the barn, the weight of the buckets bending him forward and pressing his shirt against his back. Praying none of the servants or farmhands would see him, he set the buckets down and emptied some of the water. His father would beat him again if he knew, and Boyden would laugh at his weakness. Boyden could carry 100-pound sacks of grain as if they contained feathers. Boyden was everything their father wanted in a son. Boyden hadn't killed their mother. When he reached the barn door, he shouted for Alan or Darren to open it, but no one came. The 2 farmhands were supposed to help him with the animals, but this wouldn't be the first time they'd used Robbie getting in trouble as an excuse for taking the night off. They knew he wouldn't risk another beating by telling on them. Robbie set the buckets down to open the door. The barn was large, with plenty of room for the 12 cows, 10 horses, and 4 mules, as well as for the large pig and her half-dozen piglets. When he entered, the cows mewed happily. The horses and mules neighed and stamped their feet in greeting. A bird whose wing he'd mended flew down from the rafters and landed on his shoulder. It nibbled his ear affectionately. The animal's joy seeped into his body like a warm, living current, strengthening him against both exhaustion. Animals couldn't sense the evilness in his soul. Only here was his loved. The animal's welcome quickly turned to cries of thirst. He cursed himself for making them wait so long for water. He hadn't meant to fall asleep by the river, but he'd been up most of the night helping a neighbor's goat with a difficult birth. "It will be all right. Robbie's here now. Just be patient, and I'll get water for all of you." The animals all quieted. They knew they could depend on him. It took several more trips to the well to get enough water, and by the time he'd finished, his head was swimming. But he was far from done. He started in on the milking, and the large gray-striped barn cat twined around his ankles, mewing for attention. "Hello, Ronan. Taking care of the mice and rats for me?" "Of course." Ronan licked his paws as if getting the last taste of a recent kill. "Good hunting." Robbie didn't exactly hear Ronan's words. It was more that he got an image or feeling from the cat's mind. He didn't know why he could understand animals. He'd always been able to. Perhaps it was another sign of his demon blood. Robbie placed the milk in the ice house. Then he turned to cleaning the stalls and feeding the animals. When he entered Wild Thing's stall, the mare neighed. "Wild Thing stop Father Bully to mash." Robbie hugged his horse around the neck. With Wild Thing, communication had always been particularly strong, and her mind seemed much more complex than other animals. He supposed this was because Wild Thing wasn't a normal horse. 4 years ago, he found the days-old foal out on the plains near the body of her dead mother. She'd been half mad with hunger and fear. Her brilliant coloring, somewhere between chestnut and auburn, and the stars on her chest and forehead made it obvious she was a horse stud. The herd of wild horses roamed free on the plains of Lundia, and people said they could never be tamed. The origin of the horse stods was highly debated. Ages ago, some said, Sulis herself had ridden her chariot in the land, and her horses had mixed with those of earthly origin. Others said the horse stods had escaped from the 7 hells and their demon master, and were forever unwilling to allow anyone to master them again. Robbie rubbed his face against her, choking back a sob. Wild Thing girl, why can't I do anything right? Why did I have to be born evil? Wild Thing stomped her foot. Not evil. Robbie, good. Robbie knew she was wrong, but he didn't argue. Wild Thing might well be a demon herself. Many in the valley thought so. It was very late when he finally stumbled up to bed. Despite his hunger and the pain in his back, he was so tired he fell almost immediately asleep. Early in the morning, Robbie stirred. When he tried to sit up, his back protested. But he knew the pain wouldn't last too long. His demon blood made him heal more quickly than normal people. He struggled to his feet and carefully got dressed. He brushed the tangles from his long curly hair and tied it back with a strip of leather. He felt the smoothness of his face, wondering if he'd ever grow a beard. At 16, a lot of boys had at least some hair on their faces. Then again, he'd never heard of a demon with a beard. As he left his room, the pain of an injured animal pressed against his mind. He hurried outside and heard a faint mewing. He followed the sound around to the back of the barn and found Ronan covered in blood. Robbie knelt beside the cat and stroked his head. What happened to you, boy? Don't worry. Robbie's here. Robbie cradled the cat in his arms and carried him inside the barn where he kept his medicines. As Robbie examined the injury, he sighed in relief. It's not as bad as I thought, my boy. Some of this blood isn't yours. Got a few licks in yourself, did you? Ronan mewed feebly, and Robbie saw the image of Ronan fighting several overgrown rats. Robbie cleaned the wound carefully. Then he treated it with one of his salves. Robbie couldn't explain how he knew how to make his remedies. No one had taught him. Certain plants just seemed to make good medicines, and certain medicines felt as if they'd help a particular problem. As he rubbed in the salve, a trickle of energy moved through his fingers into Ronan. The sensation resembled other men's description of the pleasure to be found with a woman. Ronan's wound began to heal. Holy Sulis, what is this I do? If being a demon feels this good, maybe I shouldn't mind being one. By the time Robbie finished bandaging the wound, Ronan had drifted into a peaceful sleep. After completing the morning chores, Robbie found his father outside the barn talking to Cullen Beavistam, a neighboring farmer. Angus, you know all my money's gone into seed, but I'll pay you a tetra at harvest. Angus scowled. How do you even know you'll have a harvest? Do you have any of your wife's preserves left? Cullen's wife was rumored to make the best preserves in the valley, not that Robbie had ever tasted any. The man nodded, glancing nervously at Robbie. Yes, I think there are 4 or 5 jars. Send all you have back with the boy, and I'll wait for the money. Robbie's father stomped back into the farmhouse without even looking at him. Cullen licked his lips nervously, and Robbie looked down at his feet, feeling both angry and ashamed. He hated it when people were scared of him, but he knew they had reason to be. You have a sick animal? He asked, still not meeting the man's eyes. Cullen backed farther away as he explained what was wrong with his plow horse. It sounded like the lung sickness. Robbie fetched his supplies and saddled Wild Thing. On the ride to the farm, Cullen stayed far away from Robbie and said nothing. Robbie tried not to mind. Farmers came to him because he was far better at treating animals than anyone else in the valley, but Robbie knew they wished they had another choice. When they neared the farm, Cullen rode a little closer. Just so you know, I've sent my wife and children to her sister's for the day. Just what do you think I'd do to them? I'd never hurt a woman or a child. I'd never hurt anybody. But even as he thought it, he knew it was a lie. Couldn't his demon blood cause harm even if he didn't mean it to? It had killed his own mother. They dismounted in front of Cullen's small stable. The farmer led him inside, still careful to keep his distance. As soon as Robbie entered, his lungs tightened, making it difficult to breathe. A bay gelding coughed and wheezed. Robbie touched the horse to be sure of the extent of the illness. "He has the lung sickness like I thought," Robbie said. He had the man light a brazier and set about brewing a remedy for the horse. "I'll give him this now, but he'll need the dose repeated 3 times a day for a week. Come fetch me again if he's not acting better in a day or so." As he put the herbs of differing amounts into the mixture, he explained the process to the farmer. "Sounds a bit complicated," Cullen said. "I'll fetch you some paper and ink, and you can write it down." "A better thing to do than writing down remedies," Robbie snapped. He wasn't about to admit he was too stupid to either read or write. Father Gildas hadn't allowed him to attend the temple school, claiming the knowledge of the goddess shouldn't be shared with the seed of demons. Just after noon, Robbie started back to his father's farm with 3 jars of strawberry and 2 jars of peach preserves in his saddlebags. He felt light-headed and his stomach ached with hunger. Cullen hadn't offered him so much as a piece of bread, and because of Ronan, he'd missed breakfast. By the time he reached home, the noon meal would be over. As he took a shortcut through the woods, he got out one of the jars of preserves. "Girl, do you think my father would ever know there were 5 jars instead of 4? Wild Thing's ears flicked in answer. "Robbie hungry. Wild Thing hungry. Nice grass there. Nice jar thing here." Robbie knew Wild Thing was suggesting they stop at the abandoned stable up ahead. He'd found the stable when he was 12 during one of his wanderings through the woods looking for plants for his remedies. The stable consisted of a small barn with 4 stalls and a fenced-in paddock, with grass for grazing. A small stream ran alongside it, and it had been in surprisingly good condition for an abandoned structure. He'd fixed it up to use as a private retreat. He stopped beside the stream and opened the jar and reveled in the sticky sweetness of the fruit. It was the best preserves he'd ever tasted. He made sure to wash any sign of preserves from his hands and face before heading home. In his dreams that night, the demon lady came to him. He'd dreamed of her for as long as he could remember. She always dressed in brightly colored, loose-fitting clothing. Tonight, she wore scarlet, trimmed with bright silver braid. Like him, the lady had black hair, green eyes, and dark skin. As a child, he'd longed for sleep, where he could curl up in her arms and listen to her stories and songs. But as he'd gotten older, the dreams had begun to trouble him. If demons loved him, didn't it mean he was as evil as people said he was? Tonight she approached through a fog of mist, sunlight forming a halo around her. She gathered him in her arms. "I love you. You won't always be alone."